everyone. Welcome to my channel. Now, I'm not going to be talking about the normal drama community or Katie Joy latest debacle, lawsuit, or drama, whatever. I wanted to talk about something a little different today. Well, different to my channel. This is not different to me. So for years before I started covering or talking about drama and just my opinion on things, I covered the anti-vaccination movement. And somewhat vaccines, but mostly the anti-vaccination and the misinformation movement. And one of the people who showed up routinely in that area was Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Now, a lot of these things that people are hearing him say for the first time, I've heard him say several times over, because a lot of these talking points, they reemerge they're almost like on a cycle. And RFK Jr., him being there making the argument is no different than anyone else. However, he's actually in a position of power now. Before he was a joke. Now, not so much. He's still a joke, but not so much. So I wanted to just kind of put together a bunch of some of the crazy shit he said and some of the things he's done, and also I want to address some of these talking points. Now, I'm not a healthcare professional. I'm not science or mathematically educated or whatever. I'm a bartender, I'll be honest. But I did write a few blogs, you could say, that kind of debunked a lot of these claims over the years. My efforts had gotten me interviewed by CNN and other media outlets. So I don't have much ground to stand on as far as the science of matters go, but I do have a bit of knowledge and experience when it comes to the anti-vaccination movement. So that's what I'm going to be discussing. It's just how crazy this shit is, a lot of it. And even when I did write the blog post, I came at it not from like a pseudo scientist or intellectual point of view. I came in it as a mother who had your average education, the average amount of knowledge in the country. So I could look at it through eyes other than science and math. I looked at it through like common sense, maybe. More importantly, I looked at it also just from a place of knowledge as far as like how some websites work and the mass movement to distribute propaganda online. This is where I'm coming from. So I just wanted to talk about my experience, the things I've learned, and how ridiculous this all is. So let's get started. So first, I'm going to be playing a few video clips, several of them, in fact, of RFK Jr. saying these ridiculously stupid things. And then I'm going to end this on one of the main talking points that's reemerged over the past week, and just how ridiculous this is and how they lack critical thinking. Let's get started. Okay, so we're going to start this off here with RFK Jr. channeling his inner Alex Jones with "The Frogs Are Gay." So here it states, RFK Jr. highlights a chilling environmental threat, the pesticide atrazine. A cited study exposed 40 male frogs to atrazine at levels the EPA deems acceptable for humans. The results, 30 were chemically castrated. 4 turned into females and produced fertile eggs. This endocrine disruptor is now ubiquitous in water systems. The question is no longer if it affects sexual development, but what its persistent exposure is doing to the population. The frog study is a warning sign that cannot be ignored. So here's what RFK Jr. had to say.
An endocrine disruptor, probably the most disturbing endocrine disruptor, and this is something we should all be looking at, is atrazine.
Yeah.
Because atrazine, which is now ubiquitous, it's everywhere, but you can take atrazine, and there, what is his name?
Jamie.
Jamie. You can look up. You can look up this study. I think the scientist's name is Tyler, I think, and that might be his first or second name.
Yeah, Jamie, just type in Tyler into Google. It doesn't matter which name. It'll come up. You'll find it. Is that all he remembers from the study? I mean, you think someone who's going to be citing a study might have a little bit more knowledge about it and be sure of at least who authored it.
But they took atrazine and they put it in a tank with 40 frogs. for
Yeah.
3 years. They put it below the exposure levels that EPA considers acceptable to humans.
Okay, so what does that mean exactly? So below exposure levels that the EPA considers acceptable for humans. Well, I'm thinking about the size of a frog, like even a big one, okay? And then I'm thinking like the size of a human. And I'm thinking that those doses, what's acceptable for either one, is going to be vastly different. So I'm thinking for the frog, using a level just below what is acceptable for humans is going to be way too much for the frog. I mean, it's the dose that makes the poison. And when you're putting that amount in something that small, it's a bigger dose than what us humans would be getting, basically.
And 30 of those frogs, they were all male frogs. And they were double Z, male frogs, so they were super males. And 30 of those frogs were chemically castrated. 4 of
There's no such thing as super male. That's, oh my God.
them turned into females and produced fertile eggs. So they took male frogs, gave them atrazine, 10% of them turned into female and produced fertile eggs. And we're subjecting our children to exposure to that every day.
What is atrazine?
It's in the water. It's a pesticide.
Here it is. Report toxic herbicide found in many Texans' drinking water. That's it. That's from 2018, November 20th.
Yeah, and what does this do to sexual development in children?
Okay.
Nobody knows.
This is going to be a running theme with RFK Jr., and it makes me uncomfortable. I'm just going to get that out of the way now. But he seems awfully preoccupied in the sexual development of children. This is gross.
We know what it does to frogs.
Yeah.
But, nobody knows what that does to, what it's doing. Those kind of persistent exposures would do to our children.
So I can't figure out if what RFK Jr. is suggesting is that atrazine is what's causing transgendered individuals. But, okay, so here's the thing. Frogs absolutely can change their gender. This is a naturally occurring phenomenon, and it happens it's quite common, actually. They'll do it for a variety of reasons. I mean, anyone who's watched Jurassic Park, at least for my generation, we all know this because it was a shocking thing to learn in that movie. But amphibians, they will change their gender if it more favors their species' chance of survival. So, like, if there's a community of frogs and they're like majority male, it's called gender reversal. Some of them will revert to being a female to better the species' chance of survival by creating a situation or an environment more favorable for reproduction. This isn't some crazy nefarious thing. This one is interesting.
And I was at the bottom of my class. I started doing heroin. I went to the top of my class. Suddenly I could sit still and I could.
It sounds, I don't know, to me that sounds like RFK Jr. is advocating for the use of heroin. Anyway, moving on. This one here, this audio, it comes through really crappy. So I'm just going to read the little bit of transcription here in the comment. It says, RFK Jr. drops massive truth bombs. There's an argument, quote, there's an argument that COVID-19 is ethnically targeted. COVID-19 attacks certain races disproportionately, Caucasians and black people. The races that are most immune to COVID-19 are Ashkenazi Jews and Chinese. We are developing ethnic bioweapons. That's what all those labs in the Ukraine are about. They're all collecting Russian DNA. Now, does that mean DNA from Russians? Or, like, is there, like, a blanket, like, Russian DNA? I don't understand that. Apparently, he thinks that viruses can be racist. Okay, now, remember when I said that this is a running theme? Well, here you go.
Average teenager in this country has 50% of the sperm count, 50% of the testosterone as a 65-year-old man. Our girls are hitting puberty 6 years earlier. And that's bad, but also our parents aren't having children.
Pretty sure if our parents are our parents, it's because they've had children. Us. And girls are hitting puberty 6 years early, he says. So the average age that a girl will enter puberty is between 9 and 13 years of age. So if he's saying that they're doing this 6 years earlier, so then that means that they're entering puberty between 3 and 7 years of age? What? Anyway, but the beginning sentence. Today, the average teenager in this country has 50% of the sperm count. I'm sorry, that's some Epstein sounding shit if you ask me. Like, I have to wonder now, was RFK Jr. over on the island counting the sperm in young boys or something? Now, before this, I would have been confident in saying that no, I don't believe he was there doing that. And I'm not saying that he was there doing that. I'm just saying that now I don't feel so confident in saying he wasn't there doing that. This is a little much.
Parents who want to have children do not have access. I have 7 children. I feel that God has blessed me with that, and I can't imagine how different my life would be if I did not have that blessing. Today,
And before anyone has kids, they say the same thing. They can't imagine what their life, how different their life would be if they did have kids. It's whatever. It is what it is. And sure, he seems to be wanting to push up the fertility rate in our country because I guess we're below like replacement theory or whatever right now. Well, there's one really like surefire way to do that. And that's to just make it so that we can support kids in a family. Give us a living wage again that, he and his parents enjoyed. Give us resources that are more easily obtainable and more cost efficient. Give us a safer, less polluted world. And you will see the reproductive rate go up. You'll see people having bigger families. You'll see happy people. And happy people will want to do that. However, when you take away their health care, you take away their food stamps, you take away any and all other social services or help or whatever they may have acquired, and you take away education for the young, and you take away any EPA regulations that help keep our community safe. Well, no one really wants to bring kids into that world. So if you really want to see the kids, then you need to create a more productive environment for them. Next we have...
President Trump said that he wants to make America healthy again, but he wants to make it strong again. When they switched the diet in juvenile detention, that showed that when they switched the diet in prisons, that violence went down to a whole food diet. That violence went down by about 70%. When they switched the diet in juvenile detention centers, the whole food diet, violence went down 100%.
That's bullshit. But I will add that I do think that there's a small morsel of truth that should be commented on here with this. I think it's safe to assume that in a bleak, dreary environment such as prison, that when you do something that just betters the life and time in there just a little bit, you're going to end up with people less likely to want to kill one another. I don't think there needed to be a study for that one, but okay.
There's a scientist at Harvard now who is curing schizophrenia with a carnivore diet. So a scientist at Harvard now who is curing schizophrenia with a carnivore diet.
So are we to believe, per RFK Jr. heard that those with schizophrenia just never ate meat before? I mean, that doesn't even make sense. A strict carnivore diet. This is going to cure schizophrenia. I guess if a strict carnivore diet could, in fact, cause mad cow disease, why not cause sanity too? Anyway, next we have.
When my uncle was president, the fertility rate in this country was 3.5%. Today, it is 1.6%. The replacement rate, in other words, the amount of fertility that you need, in order to keep your population even is 2.1%. We are below replacement right now. That is a national security threat to our country. And we know why this is happening. And President Trump is addressing the root causes through his MAHA agenda of reducing endocrine disruptors.
I just thought of something. I really hope that I'm not onto something here. But when he was speaking of the differences between boys and girls in the same speech, how boys are losing their sperm count and their testosterone, and they're below that of a 65-year-old man. But girls, though, they're going into puberty sooner, so they can be impregnated sooner, basically. I really hope that he isn't some sort of Jeffrey Epstein kind of fan who wants to see a bunch of 65-year-old men have a chance with girls. And because now here he is talking about almost like it's our responsibility as Americans to help increase our national security. So therefore we must have kids. Like, I don't know. This whole thing is just setting up awfully weird. Moving on. Oh, here we go. Speaking of Epstein.
And you run into everybody in New York. I mean, I knew Harvey Weinstein. I knew Roger Ailes. I knew O.J. Simpson came to my house. Bill Cosby came to my house.
Yeah.
So, and you run into everybody in New York. I mean, I knew.
So in the description here, it doesn't quite say it in the video, but it says, RFK Jr. explains why socializing with Jeffrey Epstein wasn't such a big deal for him. Quote, I ran into everybody in New York. I mean, I knew Harvey Weinstein. I knew Roger Ailes. I knew O.J. Simpson came to my house. Bill Cosby came to my house. Just normalize the shit out of there, right? Yeah, sure. And this one here shows RFK's Jr. whole approach to scientific trials and tests and data. Now, you see, he's an attorney, so it's common for him to take a position first and then look and search for bits and pieces to build up his case and win an argument, maybe. That's not how science works, though. Science, you have an idea, you have a thought, you have a wonder, a curiosity, and then you have tests to see which way it goes, to see what the answer is. The evidence and the proof points you to the answer, whereas in his profession, he looks for stuff to point to his answer. But here, listen to what he says.
Some studies that show the countries that use the most at the highest level of autism. Cuba has the lowest level in the world of acetaminophen use, and it has the lowest autism rate in the world. So this is not dispositive. It is not proof. We're doing the studies to make the proof.
He says, this is something he said, and then he said, it's not proof. We're doing the studies to make the proof. Then it's not a study. Then there's this one.
Unfortunately, is to not trust everything your doctor says and to understand that the medical that doctors have been co-opted by the medical cartel, that the medical schools are now run by pharmaceutical companies, they're funded by them, and that the doctors believe mainly what they're doing. They're also heavily compensated. A typical pediatrician.
See, this is what why is that such a bad thing if pharmaceutical companies have a stake or an investment in medical schools and future doctors? Because, like, you take something like college sports, and then you'll have, like, the national level of the same sport taking an interest in those college students to recruit them possibly. But they only want the very best. They only want the ones that are going to help their agency or their organization out, benefit them. Why is it so bad when a pharmaceutical company does the same thing? I mean, it doesn't mean that they're, like, bribing future doctors, trying to, I don't know, mold them or groom them or whatever. It just means that they're recruiting and they want the very best. So they're going to help ensure that the very best becomes the very best,
Physician's office makes about 50% of its funding comes from vaccines, not actually from selling the individual vaccines, from the traffic. I mean, when I was a kid, I went to the doctor when I needed stitches, and that's it. And today, every kid goes to the doctor at least 10 times to get their vaccines, and that foot traffic in and out of the office is a major part of the business plan for the pediatrician office. And they're also then rewarded by Blue Cross Blue Shield, which has...
Really? Fun fact. You don't have to go to a doctor's office to get your kids vaccinated. The health department will help you out with that right then and there. So this isn't about generating traffic by the doctor or for the doctor. This is about getting kids vaccinated. Okay, and next we have this one.
I'm looking at kids as I walk through the airports today, as I walk down the street, and I see these kids that are just overburdened with mitochondrial challenges, with inflammation. You can tell from their faces, from their body movements, and from their lack of social connection. And I know that that's not how our children are supposed to look. I'm looking at...
This is, again, part of their creepy reoccurring theme, how he's just way too invested in things with minor children. I'm not like this really is some Epstein level shit, I think. So, yeah. And who can forget this recent one of his?
This morning before I came in here, somebody showed me a TikTok video of a pregnant woman at 8 months pregnant. She is an associate professor at the Columbia Medical School. And she is saying F Trump and gobbling Tylenol with her baby in her placenta. And the...
What? With her... What? Oh my God.
The level of Trump derangement syndrome has now left the political landscapes, and it is now in the realm of pathology. And a mother could overwhelm millions of years of maternal instinct to put her baby at risk. And all you have to do is look at the studies which you and I talked about. It's not dispositive that causes autism. It is so suggestive that anybody who takes this stuff during pregnancy, unless they have to, is irresponsible.
But,
there are 15...
See, that doesn't make sense to me, because if they're irresponsible to take it, if they don't really have to, then wouldn't them having to be irresponsible as well? Because it's a pain reliever. It's not something that's going to lower blood sugar or blood pressure. It's a pain reliever. There's others you could choose from, or even just maybe a movement or something. You know, there's other options. But he's saying that it's acceptable if they have to. Well, what's the criteria for have to anyway? Because that just seems like he's calling out a TikToker, someone who works at Columbia Medical School, from what he said, for taking Tylenol on its TikTok live and saying fuck Trump while pregnant. On the national arena, he's calling this person out. Like, he's already made a target of her. So he's going to, for him to do that, how does he know she didn't have to, right? So this have to thing, that's a bunch of bullshit.
In rodent studies, every one of them shows if you give it to the mother, the babies, and particularly the male babies, have profound neurological and behavioral changes.
So is he saying that the male baby rats become autistic? Is that I want to know how that's tested. I want to know what the criteria is for a rat to be diagnosed with autism. I really, really want. Like, I'm here for that. Okay, so now let's hear his ridiculous claims on the HPV vaccine.
Gardasil is probably the single worst mass vaccine that we've ever seen. This vaccine targets millions of preteens and teens for whom the risk of dying from cervical cancer is zero. The death rate...
And that's true. When the teens and preteens obtain the vaccine, their risk of dying then, at their current time and stage in life, of cervical cancer is probably very likely zero. Because, well, it's still early yet. They haven't lived life. They haven't risked contracting it yet, probably. So yeah, that makes sense. But it doesn't stay that way. That's the whole point.
In the Gardasil trials were 37 times the death rates for cervical cancer. Children who take that vaccine, the Gardasil vaccine, are 37 times more likely to die from the vaccine than they are to die from cervical cancer. So
think about that. He's saying for every person who dies from cervical cancer, there's 37 more people who died from the vaccine. But yet, we're still giving it out to everyone. Like that would happen.
The problem with Gardasil, like most vaccines, is it was never tested against a true placebo, an inert placebo. And CDC and HHS say, if you don't test it against a true placebo, it's not science. The entity that is actually...
See, that's always irritated me whenever people have said that. Vaccines are absolutely tested against a true placebo, like a saline solution, for example. But not always. You see, when a new vaccine is coming out, it's the first of its kind, then yes, it's tested against a saline solution. But subsequent vaccines are then tested against a previous version. And it's because it's considered unethical to do it otherwise. If there's another vaccine that is already passed trials and has already made it to market, then it's deemed safe enough to be used as an active control. And the HPV vaccine was absolutely used against a true placebo in the very beginning. So he's lying right there.
Performing the study is, and paying for the study, is Merck. So Merck got to decide which injuries were being caused by Gardasil and which were just bad coincidences. And because it had that power, it just wrote them all off as bad coincidences. You can do that when there's no placebo, because the injuries they were seeing in the control group, where the girls were getting aluminum neurotoxins, were identical to the injuries they were getting in the Gardasil group. So they said, well, we don't have to report any of these as vaccine injuries.
But you see, the very first clinical trial with the very first HPV vaccine would have been against a true placebo. And, well, if these ailments were matching up between the control and those given the vaccine, well, then they would not be because of the vaccine. So what he's talking about here, I'm not even positive if this was I think that this was the very first vaccine, because they all seem to be stuck on that. And I'm not even sure if another company is been allowed to make one yet. I don't know if the patent has run out. And he wants to talk about how Merck is funding this, the trials and the studies and everything. Well, who the fuck else is supposed to fund it? What, are our tax dollars supposed to fund it for the pharmaceutical companies? I think not. So yes, these billion-dollar profit pharmaceutical companies should absolutely be footing their own bill. How dare he think otherwise? That's just ridiculous. So this next one is unbelievable.
Tony Fauci made sure that none of those kids had guardians, which is illegal. And then he hid what he was doing from the boards. He took foster homes in 6 states and he turned them over to the pharmaceutical industry. He made sure that the people who were running those foster homes did not even have medical training. Most of them were immigrants who came from the Dominican Republic. They knew nothing about medicine or responsibilities, and they were sickened when they realized slowly what they were involved in doing to these children, that they were torturing these children. And you know, there's videos of these children.
He's saying that Fauci commandeered some foster homes, I guess, and it ran experiments or whatever on all the kids in these foster homes, and he had people employed in these foster homes who were immigrants. But here's the thing, and then he says they slowly realized that what they were doing to the kids was torture. I don't think that would get lost in translation anywhere. Like, you gotta know quickly that what you're doing is causing the harm it's causing if it reaches the level of torture. It's not something you slowly come to terms with and realize, like, oh, oops, I can't believe I didn't realize that before. No, what are you talking about?
Old BBC documentary that will make you cry. I promise you, you cannot look at these without weeping. One of these kids, a 12-year-old who's trying to protect the 8 years old, and he has a tube in his stomach, and he's telling them,
How was this filmed? Like, who filmed this and not reported to authorities? How did this happen?
to fight them, and this is what they do. If you fight them, you can't fight them. You need to just take the drugs. And the kids didn't want to take them because the drugs were making them horribly sick. And Celia Farber was
this bitch.
Amazing researcher who worked on this chapter for me and did the original research on it.
And did a lot of the original research on it. So this is what his co-writer for this whatever book or he's trying to sell here. Okay.
She went up to Hawthorne, New York, to the Gates of Heaven Cemetery. She found the cemetery where Fauci was disposing of the corpses of these children who died.
I'm just trying to picture this. I'm trying to picture just walking up through the cemetery gates and walking around. And just suddenly you coming across Anthony Fauci throwing bodies into a grave. Like, what?
Legal experiments. She found an open pit. It was actually covered by an astroturf carpet. She opened the astroturf carpet and she saw hundreds and hundreds of tiny little coffins stacked haphazardly upon each other, because these are children who...
Okay. If you're going to just dispose of hundreds upon hundreds of bodies of kids, and you're going to put them all in a mass grave like burial pit, why the fuck would you bother with coffins? Why? That's going to take up more space. And who's building all the coffins? Who's paying for them? Like, that just seems like a huge, extra step. This doesn't make sense. This is the most asinine thing I've ever heard, I think.
Parents, and nobody was there to protect them. And Tony Fauci treated them as collateral damage. And, his objective was to enlarge the market.
Yet, he's someone we never heard of before COVID. We never heard of his name before COVID. Maybe some people did and throughout the whole HIV saga, but most of the public has never heard of this man's name before. But yet he killed all of these foster kids and just buried them all in a New York State cemetery in a huge grave under some astroturf. What the fuck? This is the head of our Health and Human Services, guys, for the entire country. This is, oh my God. Next, we have this one.
I want to get to vaccines. If your kids were young now, would you give them the measles, the mumps vaccine?
No. I got measles, mumps when I was a kid. It was...
Lots of people used to die from those diseases.
Well, you know what? They died in the 1900s, or early 1900s. There were about 10,000 Americans a year who died. In 1964, there was about 300 or 400 who died, and they were almost all severely malnourished kids, mainly from the Mississippi Delta. This was before the poverty program, so there was a lot of starving.
So these kids who are severely malnourished, who probably need the help and assistance of the general public more than most kids, well, they're just on their own. Fuck you. There's not enough of you there to actually, warrant the use of this vaccine on a mass scale. So sorry about your luck. That's what he's saying. Oh, and most of you are in the Mississippi Delta, he's saying. So yeah, fuck you, Mississippi.
Very, very hard to kill a healthy child with any infectious disease, but particularly with measles. And the World Health Organization now says vitamin A is an absolute cure for measles, which we didn't know about back then. Back then, we were treated with chicken soup, and it was...
Yeah, and Mom's home-cooked chicken soup never had any vitamin A in it, right? What the...
A week at home watching Leave It to Beaver, and every kid caught it.
All right, that's a reason enough to get the vaccine.
little kid got it, and I had 11 brothers and sisters, and we all got it, and we were all fine. And there are
Does this sound like a man who's fine to you? It doesn't to me. So, I mean, maybe measles caused this? I don't know.
lots of studies out there now that show that kids who get measles as a child are much healthier when they grow up, that they're much more resistant to cancers, to
Except for the ones who don't get to grow up.
atopic diseases, to allergies, and to heart disease.
Right.
Want to get to
In all seriousness, measles does not like protect you from any further ailments down the road other than possibly contracting measles again. And there's actually risks that come from having contracted measles. Mostly like respiratory issues later in life or throughout life, but there's other risks too that come with it. This next one here is from Scott Hamilton Kennedy. Scott Hamilton Kennedy made a documentary called Shot in the Arm. I spoke with him before he made the documentary, when he was, just in the beginning stages of it. And we had a few good conversations about the anti-vaccination movement. And he ended up releasing one version of the movie, but then he went back to the drawing board. And when he did that, Neil deGrasse Tyson came on board. And they created what, in my opinion, the first one I thought was great. And it definitely covered all the points I think he wanted it to cover. But I do think it missed out on a bigger aspect. And that is the spread of misinformation and the just how easily this happens and just how damaging it can be. And so A Shot in the Arm, the one that he just came out with about a year ago, I think, that absolutely hit home on that. And if you can watch it, if there's any way you can watch it, I highly recommend it. You could probably find a link to it somewhere around his social media pages. So that's Scott Hamilton Kennedy. I don't know if there's any relation. I never thought of that. I don't know. Anyway, so here it says, the story RFK Jr. doesn't want you to see. Our Samoa sequence from Shot in the Arm. In 2018, 2 babies died after 2 nurses mistakenly mixed a muscle relaxant into their MMR vaccines. This triggered fear, confusion, and a devastating outbreak. 5,000 measles cases and 83 deaths, mostly children. Instead of helping, RFK Jr. spread disinformation, traveled to Samoa to meet with the local anti-vax activists and even the prime minister, fueling more mistrust. Watch how visibly cagey he gets when confronted on his role. These are not the qualities we want in someone leading HHS. Impeach RFK Jr.
Samoa, 2018, 2 babies were given the MMR. Can you tell us your version of that story?
I don't remember well enough what happened. I know that there were a number of children who were. I didn't go to Samoa, by the way, for anything to do with that issue.
While he was there, he met with these 2 activists. See, what had happened was 2 kids were being vaccinated for MMR, and then the nurses administering them made a mistake, and they mixed it with a muscle relaxant, which ended up killing both the young children, babies. So, but no one knew exactly what the cause was right off the bat. So all this fear spread, and upon hearing this, RFK Jr. decides to go to Samoa to meet with people there. Well, he met with, forgive me, I cannot remember these names. So 2 of the people he met with. So one was a Samoan female activist who met with our Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is Taylor Winterstein. Now, I have to say, I remember when this happened in real time. I was following this. We all were. An Australian Samoan anti-vaccine social media influencer. Their meeting took place in 2019, months before a deadly measles outbreak in Samoa. The reason why she was such a prominent figure and an influencer is because her husband was a rugby player, a famous rugby player. I can't remember his name, though. We don't have rugby. I don't know. And also, in addition to her, he also met with, this guy was interesting, to say the least, an anti-vaccination activist, Edwin Tomasi. Now, during the measles outbreak, Tomasi was still pushing vitamin A as a cure-all and was going to people's home, like home by home basis, to encourage them not to vaccinate in the middle of a measles outbreak. and then gave them bullshit to treat it. He was arrested, rightfully so. This is who RFK Jr. met with. These are the people RFK Jr. fucking met with. Oh, and this is, I did not know this before. I just newly discovered while looking up the names of the other activists there. But here, it says here that Kennedy lied. Kennedy said, "We don't know what was killing them," Kennedy said during tense U.S. Senate hearings last week on whether he should oversee the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, suggesting that the cause of the 83 deaths, mostly of children under age 5, was unclear. "It's a total fabrication," Samoa Director General of Health, Dr. Alec Ekaroma, told the Associated Press of Kennedy's comments. Yet they knew what killed the 83 kids. It was measles or complications as a result of measles. So, yeah. And here's what happened in Samoa. Here's what Robert F. Kennedy decided to inadvertently aid in causing while trying to capitalize on the 2 tragic deaths of 2 babies through human error. What happened was, in Samoa, in 2019, 83 people in a population of 200,000 died. Vaccination rates were historically low because of poor public health management and the 2018 deaths of 2 babies whose vaccines were incorrectly prepared, prompting fears that the MMR immunization was unsafe before the nature of the error was discovered. The government suspended vaccinations for 10 months before the outbreak, the period when Kennedy visited. His trip was organized by a Samoan anti-vaccine influencer, according to a 2021 blog post by Kennedy. On Wednesday, Kennedy denied that his visit had fueled anti-vaccine sentiment. A spokesperson didn't immediately respond to a request for comment on Monday. "Anti-vaxxers from New Zealand came to be with him there," Ekarama said. "That's how I know that his influence can be far-reaching." What did Kennedy say about the deaths? "When the tissue samples were sent to New Zealand, most of the people did not have measles," Kennedy told U.S. Senator Ron Wyden, an Oregon Democrat. Ekarama, a medical doctor who also holds a doctorate in health, said that the claim was a huge denial of the fact that doctors from several countries traveled to Samoa to treat measles patients. The Samoan official wasn't the health chief during the outbreak, but confirmed key details with his predecessor. He said, "Only 1 autopsy was carried out and no post-mortem tissue samples were sent abroad, which was not unusual because measles is a simple disease to diagnose," said Ekarama. Blood samples from living patients were sent to Australia and New Zealand, where the Public Health Agency said Monday that testing had confirmed the same strain of measles circulating in New Zealand at the time. Why did Kennedy travel to Samoa? "I went there. Nothing to do with vaccines," Kennedy said Wednesday. "I went there to introduce a medical informatics system that would digitalize records in Samoa and make health delivery much more efficient." Because that's what he cares about, is digitizing medical records. Ekarama rejected the assertion, referring to social media posts by anti-vaccine advocates who posed for photos with Kennedy during his trip. One later wrote on the blog of Kennedy's, that then nonprofit Children's Health Defense, which has decreed MMR vaccines as unsafe, that during the outbreak he received advice from people assembled by Kennedy, encouraging the alternative treatments he was supplying to Samoan families. In the same blog post, Kennedy recalled meeting Samoa's then Prime Minister, who he said was, quote, "curious to measure health outcomes following the natural experiment created by the national respite from vaccines." In late 2019, Kennedy wrote to the leader saying that the deaths could have been caused by a measles vaccine, statements he repeated in written responses to senators' questions following the hearing. He urged the Samoan leader to approach a particular laboratory to investigate the source of the outbreak. Though it's unlikely that Kennedy really was like the root cause of it, his actions and his visit sure as hell did not help. The main cause, I think, is just already the widespread doubt and confusion about vaccines. And then you have something like what happened with the 2 babies who were given the incorrect mixture and who died. I think that had the biggest effect of all. And then you have someone like Kennedy coming by to just monetize or capitalize on the situation. So yeah, he added to it, without a doubt.
Telephone brings you a breaking news on the death of two young children, both aged 1 year old, who died soon after being vaccinated at Safotu Hospital.
The baby was shaking and turned yellowish. Even the eyes, the whole face, he was gone.
While it was still a mystery exactly why these children died, the Prime Minister immediately declared a ban on MMR and all vaccines. They took this historic action because of a sincere belief that the MMR vaccine can cause autism, a developmental disability his own grandson suffers from.
2 babies dead in Samoa. It's a heartfelt story. That video is up to 174,000 views and climbing. Share it with everyone you know. This is how we are changing the world. This is one of the things we're doing.
Through his nonprofit advocacy group, Children's Health Defense, Robert Kennedy Jr. praised the Prime Minister for his decisive action. And in 2019, he even visited Samoa with his wife, actress Cheryl Hines.
We feel very honored to be spending time with the Prime Minister, and my husband wants to move here.
For almost a year, the message to the people of Samoa was that vaccinations will harm or even kill you. And in the fall of 2019, the consequences of those messages became crystal clear.
This small Pacific nation is in a state of emergency. More than 4,000 Samoans who've contracted measles since the outbreak began. Most of the victims are young kids.
By Wednesday, the death toll from last month's measles outbreak in Samoa had risen to over 60, the vast majority of those children.
Yeah, so be sure to check out Scott Hamilton Kennedy's page and possibly even the movie Shot in the Arm movie. Hashtag Shot in the Arm movie is one way you could find it too pretty quickly.
Do you have any idea of how many cases of measles were in Samoa between, say, 1986 and 2019?
I have no idea.
Great, okay, I've got that. 1986, 1 case of measles, 93, 7, 2005, 0, 2006, 0, 2009, 0, and in 2019 there were 5,707 measles cases. Do you know what happened in 2019?
Yeah, I'm aware there was a measles outbreak, but I didn't have anything, I have nothing to do with people not vaccinating in Samoa. I never told anybody not to vaccinate. I didn't, go there for any reason to do with that.
One News has learned of a high-level anti-vax meeting just before this deadly measles outbreak, a meeting between vaccination critic Robert Kennedy Jr. and anti-vax blogger Taylor Winterstein. Publicising her meeting with the high-profile Kennedy as profoundly monumental for her movement.
This so-called anti-vaxxer, Edwin Tamasese, he had promoted the use of vitamin C to cure the disease.
During the country's 2-day mass measles vaccination drive last week, he posted, "I'll be here to mop up your mess, enjoy your killing sprees."
But the government is fighting back.
Edwin Tamasese is now under arrest, charged with incitement against a government.
And this next part is quite ridiculous. I mean, the claim. I'm going to break it all down for you in just a moment, but first let me play this.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr., you're HHS secretary. Let me ask you something. Should doctors make decisions based upon what's best for their patients or based upon what makes them the most money? It's not a tough question, but we've inherited a healthcare system that constantly pushes doctors toward the latter. It rewards certain treatments not because they're better for the patient, but because someone profits. Take what happened during COVID. Hospitals were paid to report staff vaccination rates.
Remember that for a second, okay? I want to point this out. He's saying that doctors are pushing these things because it makes them more money, not because it's better for the patient. It makes them more money. And he's saying that the health insurance company is supporting of this because it makes them money. Just remember that.
Those numbers were fed into the National Healthcare Safety Network, then published on the CDC website to shame any hospital that refused to become an enforcer of federal vaccine mandates. Today, I'm proud to announce we've eliminated that policy by repealing a dangerous Biden-era provision in the CMS inpatient payment rule. And we're not stopping there. We're scanning every corner of the healthcare system for hidden incentives that corrupt medical judgment. What we're finding is alarming. Doctors are being paid to vaccinate, not to evaluate. They're pressured to follow the money, not the science. We've recently uncovered that more than 36,000 doctors had their Medicare reimbursements altered based upon childhood vaccination rates. That's not medicine. That's coercion. It's immoral. It has no place in a constitutional democracy or in a system that claims to protect children. Medical decisions should be made based upon one thing and one thing only, the well-being of the patient, never on a financial bonus or a government mandate. Patients deserve honest, uncorrupted advice from their doctors. Doctors deserve the freedom to use their training and to follow the science and speak the truth without fear of punishment. Doctors should be guided by medical judgment and their Hippocratic oath, not by financial incentives or government mandates. That's what this policy change is about, and it's just the beginning. Thank you very much.
Okay, so now this is stemming from a claim that there's health insurance companies that will give a financial incentive to doctors for having patients vaccinated, to pediatricians primarily. Now, I'm going to now go back to an article. So I'm now going to pull up an article I wrote back in 2018 where I debunked this exact claim. See, this is what happens. So with the anti-vaccine community or movement, whatever, they just reuse the same talking points. They just keep recycling them over and over again. And I'll include a link to all of this in the description, but I'm referencing where I came across this claim. And I go on to say, let's begin with the claim itself. In a recent posting by Vaccine Impact, the site referenced an article written by a veteran anti-vaccine activist named J.B. Hanley. All right, so let's just pull up these links because I'm not sure how many of these links are still up. Oftentimes when it comes to anti-vaccination people, they don't keep their shit up for long. So what do we have here? Vaccine Impact. Oh, look at that. This one's still up. Of course it is, because this is the one that's not full of shit. Then we have Medium will be back. Oh, I guess Medium's not available right now. Okay. And then we have, we're having trouble finding that site for J.B. Hanley. Okay. So back to here. In this article, Hanley shared an image from the Blue Cross Blue Shield incentive PDF file, as well as a link to the PDF file itself. Let's see if we can pull that up. Oh, look at that. It's going to come up. So look at that. The PDF file still comes up. So yeah, we'll get back to that in a minute, though. I'm going to continue. So continue reading. Directly under the image and PDF link posted in this article, Hanley makes the following claim, quote, Blue Cross will give your pediatrician $400 per child that has received 100% of the 25 vaccines they recommend by age 2. Incredible. Pediatric practices, according to this study, average about 1,546 patients per doctor. That means that a 5-doctor pediatric practice, if they reach 100% compliance on vaccinations, will receive a bonus of just over $3 million. That's not a typo. My math is right. That's $3 million bucks. Does your pediatrician have a conflict in considering the benefits and risks of vaccines? Okay, there's a lot to break down there. First, let me pull up this link, see what this comes up. Okay, so this still comes up. All right, good. So then next I wrote, right off the bat, he is misinterpreting the data and pulling out stats that don't apply here just so he can exaggerate the math for a rather sensible incentive program and hopes readers will view it as a sinister plot against Americans. He created shock value statistics. To begin with, the program doesn't require 100% of the target panel to comply to those qualifications. It requires 63%, as shown at the bottom of the image in the horizontal column listed as target com. He also figures out the bonus figure of 3 million by using the estimated 1,546 total patients per doctor for a 5-doctor practice. His math is grossly wrong, misleading, and incomplete. Let's see if I can do any better. Okay, so first though, you have to establish a few variables. Okay, so one thing I wanted to establish is that really the amount of patients a single doctor can expect to see, throughout the year. So I went looking into that, and I came across in 2012, Annels of Family Medicine wrote an article estimating a reasonable patient panel size for primary care physicians who carry out various degrees of team-based task delegation. Now, not every doctor is equal. There are some doctors who have a larger staff of nurse practitioners, RNs, physician's assistants. So they can then delegate certain tasks or whatever out to the rest of the staff to work with the patient on. So the doctor has his time freed up more. So a doctor who delegates a lot of tasks is high delegation. Then there's doctors who really don't have much of a staff, and therefore they do it all. They would be low delegation. Okay, so the data analysis were collected from Duke University investigators. And then it says, quote, the average time per patient per year needed for preventative, chronic, and acute care services derived from the Duke estimates it goes on, for a total of 2.06 hours of service per year per patient. Using the assumption of 2,025 work hours per year per primary care physician and the same age-sex distribution of the patient panel used in the Duke analysis, one physician could reasonably care for a panel of 983 patients under a non-delegated primary care mode. So no delegation would be expect about 983 patients. But then under the most ambitious assumption about the degree of delegation possible, one physician could reasonably care for a panel of 1,947 patients. Models with less service time were as follows. So to summarize, one physician who doesn't delegate any preventative, chronic, or acute patient services to other healthcare professionals who may be employed as part of the staff could reasonably tend to an annual panel size of 983 patients. And then you have the high delegation, the one who delegates the most, 1,947 patients. Then you have medium degree of task delegation, which is 1,523, and low degree of task delegation, which would be 1,387. So now, I didn't want to just pick one delegation and go with it. I kept all four throughout all of my math. So if we take these 4 task delegations, instead of doing 100% like the anti-vaccination movement wants to use, we're going to take these 4 task delegation figures and we're going to apply that with the 63%, okay? So applying that, so 63% of the whole patient panel estimates, we end up with the following bonuses. For no delegations, 247, so just under $250,000. For high task delegation, it's just under $500,000, okay? But wait, there's more. These figures would still be inaccurate since not all patients would meet the qualifying age. Only patients who received the vaccinations listed in the image on or before their 2nd birthday qualify to be counted. So according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, the average annual well visit per pediatric office for patients age 2 is 24.6. So, for example, the age qualifying 24.6 of the no task delegation 983 patient total would then become only 241 patients. So, and then you take that now 241 patients and figure out the 63% of that, they would be, because you would have to have 63% of those patients receiving the necessary vaccines. So then that would then come to 152 patients. So then you figure out the 152 times the 400, and you end up with, for no task delegation, 6,000, almost 61,000 in bonuses. And then doing the rest of the math for the other delegations is as follows. But the high delegation would be 120,700 basically. So we went from 3 million already down to 120,000. But wait, there's more. Since this incentive program is restricted to only those insured by Blue Cross Blue Shield, every age qualifying patient would have to be insured by Blue Cross Blue Shield for these new figures to be correct. But according to Vaxopedia, let's say that 10% of age qualifying patients are insured by Blue Cross Blue Shield, which according to Vaxopedia is a high estimate. And here's where I pulled up the Vaxopedia article. There's a lot more information in here. I'll include a link to it. So, at 10%, this brings the qualified patients down to just a handful. The estimated Blue Cross Blue Shield insured patients in no task delegation would be 98.3. Of the 98.3 Blue Cross Blue Shield patients, the 24.6 that are estimated to be age qualifying is now 24.18. Now, our target minimum of 63% of that becomes 15 patients, 15 eligible patients in no task delegation. So the possible incentive amount is now $6,093 for no task delegation. For high task delegation, using these same figures, we are now dropped down to $12,000. But wait, there's more. What if every U.S. pediatrician met these new criteria listed above? As of 2011, there were 91,915 physicians in the U.S. that identified as pediatricians, pediatric medicine, or pediatric surgical, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics. By these figures, the minimum bonus to be paid out to physicians in each task delegation, assuming every doctor met the qualifying criteria, would be as follows. So here, what I did was, these figures here are for one doctor. So I then took this figure, like 6,093, and multiplied it times 91,915. And so for no task delegation, I got 560 million. And for high task delegation, I got 1,109,000,000. So this is, according to their math, the anti-vaxxers, this is what the insurance company would potentially be opening themselves up to having to pay yearly. But there's more. Now, let's try that again, but with using Hanley's figures and interpretation on this program. He claimed that the average doctor sees 1,546 patients, and that if 100% of this figure was vaccinated, then the doctor would receive a $400 bonus for every single patient. That would mean one qualifying doctor would be awarded a bonus of $618,000. If every pediatrician in the U.S. met this 100% Hanley interpreted criteria, then the total maximum annual amount possible to be paid out by Blue Cross Blue Shield would be $56 billion, almost $57 billion. Think about that. Never mind the science, never mind the math. Just think about this with a little bit of common sense. In the one country where healthcare coverage is a for-profit business, anti-vaccine activists believe there's a physician incentive program that is leaving a health insurance company open to the possibility of having to pay out almost $57 billion annually as a bonus. As if that isn't an adequately insane belief on its own, it gets worse. Anti-vaccine activists believe the actors in this theory of theirs know that vaccines cause physical injury to those who receive them, and that these vaccine injuries then require new and additional medical care that the insurance companies will have to pay for through medical claims. So let me say this one more time. The anti-vaccine community is arguing that the U.S.-based for-profit health insurance companies are paying for vaccines, paying possible incentives that total to almost $57 billion a year for administering the vaccines, just so they can then have to pay for the consequences of said vaccines and medical claims. And they are doing this because they are a bunch of corrupt, greedy capitalists. What? But wait, there's one more to wrap this all up. None of these figures even apply since the Blue Cross Blue Shield incentive program was only available to Michigan State Blue Cross Blue Shield physician providers, and only if they chose to participate. So this whole thing was for naught, really. But since this incentive program here came out in 2006, actually, since then there have been other incentive programs. And let me show you what it consists of. scrolling through this. Like, here's an example of others. So, incentive quality measures. So, depression management. If you have a certain amount of your diabetic, if a doctor has a certain amount of their diabetic patients with an A1C below a certain amount, there's an incentive for that. If they have a certain amount of their patient roster below, the patient roster's BMI assessment below a certain amount, there's an incentive for that. If a certain amount of their patients are screened for breast cancer, there's an incentive for that. Controlling blood, there's an incentive for these doctors to be good doctors and to look after their patients. They're not incentivizing them to do a specific treatment regardless of the cause. And no insurance company would ever back that either. Think about back in, what was it, the 80s or whatever, when bone marrow transplant was like a new, experimental procedure for certain types of leukemia. Well, insurance companies didn't want to pay for that because there wasn't enough data or evidence to show that this would be successful. So it didn't make business sense, fiscal sense to drop all this money into a risky experimental procedure and possibly not have it work. So they would deny these claims. They would deny doing this, okay? No health insurance company is going to invest that much money and approve all this shit just so that they can be stuck with the tab later on. It's not going to happen. If there's any truth to the harm, to the claim that vaccines cause harm, health insurance companies would not cover them. Anyway, that's all I wanted to show and talk about today. So, hopefully you, anyone curious can just I didn't do the frog one, did I? Just try to look at the source of the information being provided. Look to see if the source has a dog in the fight, if they're associated with any of the known figureheads of the opposition or of either side, really. You can do this just by Googling the website itself, not going to the website, but in searching Google for the website for information on it. Oftentimes they can tell you or give you an inclination as to who owns it, or even what information has been found out previously. And then you can see if a site is biased or not. You'd be surprised what you would find. And also pay attention to wording, because there's one article I was reading while preparing for this about the frogs, whatever, the study there with the frogs. And actually, I'm just going to pull that up. There we go. So like right here, okay, for Berkeley News, this, I don't even have to open it to know that this is going to be a bullshit one-sided article. Right here in the introductory sentence, it says, atrazine, one of the world's most widely used pesticides, wreaks havoc. Who said anything about this being havoc-inducing to the frogs? It's a common thing found naturally that occurs in frogs. Why would that happen if it wreaked havoc? So the fact that they're already starting by saying that this thing that happens, it's bad for the frogs, that tells you where they're coming from. And then it goes on to say, wreaks havoc with the sex lives of adult male frogs, emasculating 3/4 of them. I didn't know frogs cared that much about masculinity. I thought that was like a human construct, really. But this writer, this author, is putting their own thoughts and feelings about masculinity onto these frogs and using this study to make some sort of argument against anything that threatens their masculinity. Just pay attention to the words used, to the verbiage, because you learn a lot from that. See, this is one great example of how people suck, when they spread these lies for whatever personal reason or benefit for them at the cost of everyone else. So hopefully anyone watching this takes what I'm saying into account and just looks at things a bit more critical. Thanks for watching.
Okay, now it's time for member shoutouts. I'd like to thank DC, Mr. Black Wolf, Jill B, Sam, channel has been deleted. Channel has been deleted. Sally Godfrey, channel has been deleted. Brenda Smith, Estella Havisham, Rena Rue, Nana Hawk, Sean Coffey, Flying Mom Laura, Brilliant, Jen Gerard, and Poodlerific. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you everyone for watching.